Right, let's start. Today's topic is SmartIDs, and that means that with QFTest 6.0 you can use the component recognition criteria directly in the place where the QFTest component ID always went. Right, so let's have a closer look at that. Yeah, so the idea was to have a stable and flexible component recognition without having to save the recognition criteria in the component nodes, because that component tree is very nice when it's stable and not too the depth not becoming too deep. But with many applications that's the case, but not with all. So we came up with this idea of SmartIDs, and the idea is to keep simple things simple. So I'd like to start with the classic component node, because that's what the SmartIDs are based on as well. These recognition criteria that, well, up to now have always had to be saved somewhere and can now be used directly. So what have we got? We got the class, then the name or the ID of the GUI object, then the direct text associated with a component, like the text on a button. Then we have another label in the extra features, the QFS label, which is, in the case of the button, the text directly associated with it. But with text fields, it does make sense to use the text of the text field for component recognition. But there it's better to look for a label somewhere around the text field and use the text of the label for that. So that goes into the QFS label in the extra features. And then we also got the index, and well, we have not implemented geometry for SmartIDs because that's too weak for proper component recognition. At least when you've got the idea to keep simple things simple. Right, the QFTest ID will, in the classical component node, has to be used in the mouse clicks and all the action nodes. Yeah, so that's what it will look like when you use it in the test suite. Yeah, and you have the hierarchy. That's an important part of component recognition. Right, and here you've got the component ID, and that's being used in the event nodes and check nodes. Right, then, well, the idea of making the component tree a bit slimmer and maybe just use one of the criteria for component recognition is quite old, and we implemented that with generic components so far. So you would have component node, this, and then name as a variable, for example. And that was too much, one back. The name as the variable, and then you would have a procedure, and there you'd have a mouse click referencing that component node called generic button. And well, you can set the variable name anywhere, but it's very useful or easy when you pass it as a parameter to that procedure. And then that's the procedure call all in the details, and that's what it looks like in the tree. And well, it's pretty pretty well readable. Click button, OK button. So the readability is a lot better than with cryptic. That's a nice name. Let's put it like that. So that's okay. And yeah, you can also use other criteria as variables in the generic components. So the next example is with the QFS label as recognition criteria. So again, you have a procedure using that generic button and replaying a click to that, and the actual value for the variable comes via parameter. So again, you have a procedure call, which is nice and readable. Click button, OK. Yeah, one of the snags with this way of generic components that you need to have one component for each class, and also when you want to need to have hierarchies, like you have a dialog and then a button or a text field or a checkbox in the dialog, you need to implement that hierarchy via nodes. So that's the next example. Okay. Like here, you have the nested nodes. First, the dialog. Here, the variable is in the name field. And then you've got the component, and there we are using the feature as variable. Right, so this time, well, the procedure is the same. You're referencing the generic button here, but you have to provide two variables, one for the dialog, one for the button. So that's what the call will look like and how it's implemented. The good thing about the generic components is that you get a very lean component tree. You don't have to record components when you set up your tests, and that's very useful when you set up the test just using procedure calls. Then you want to insert procedure calls, but you don't want to record all the component nodes and then use the QF test IDs of the components. It's much nicer when the tester inserts the procedure call and then can have a look at the application and sees that the text field is called surname, for example, and then just type surname as the parameter. Yeah, the disadvantages definitely are that you need quite a number of generic components, one for each class, one for each criteria, and also for when you want to implement a certain structure, and that multiplies. And also, it's not very flexible, because when you have like the label applies to two text fields, then you have to. It's not. Well, then it's not flexible. You can implement it, but that wasn't that easy or not as nice. Yeah. Then, of course, when you have one node where the information is stored, and there's a change, then you just have to change that one node, and that's it for maintenance. Whereas when you're using parameters, then you have to do a search and replace and make sure you get the correct places. Like when you have an OK button and that changes in one dialog and not in the other, then you've got to make sure only to change the OKs in the correct procedure calls. Yeah, then sometimes you get the performance issues when you're using labels, not with names for variables, because when you open a page, then QFTest will create a hash map of all the names, and that's as performant with variables, generic components, as with the others. But when you use the labels for component recognition, then this well, it's okay when there aren't too many components on that page, then you probably not notice it at all. But when you get web applications with hundreds or thousands of GUI objects, so most of them hidden, obviously, but still they're there, and then it can be noticeable when you're working with labels. And you have a reduced number of recognition criteria. Well, obviously that's the idea to just use one, but on the other hand, that can be a disadvantage as well. Right, so SmartIDs basically solve this problem. They've got all the pros, like the generic components, and these three down here, they're the same. But yeah, let's have a look at SmartIDs, how they work. Right, so with a SmartID, you can type a hash in the place where you would write the QFTest ID of the component. And then QFTest knows that the text that then comes is a criteria for component recognition that it should use directly without referring to any component node. And it can be either one criteria, like the name or the label, or the class, or it can be a combination. Yeah, so you have the class name, the feature field, then the QFS label and the extra features. And actually, you can use all the extra features that you find in the node if you recorded the component. But then you would have to tell QFTest the name of the extra feature you're addressing as well. So you'd have to type a bit more. And then you can also use the index and also the component hierarchy, because you can use nested SmartIDs. Right, so some examples. Well, there's a general syntax. Let's have a look at the examples. Like you can have hash and then the label of the component hash and the name. And the combination of class. The colon is important because that indicates that whatever string is before the colon, that'll be treated as a class name. And then the label or the name or just the class, that's possible as well. And very useful when you've got tables where there's only one table on the window or in the dialog. So you can just type table colon hash table colon actually, and that's it. If you've got two tables and you want to use the second one, then you can type table colon 1 for the second, because this index starts at 0. Here with the 2 you would reference the third instance of whatever class. Yeah, this is an example where you have the SmartID for the parent component. But it doesn't have to be the actual parent. It can be an ancestor, one container where the what is called the child component here is in. So it's just got to be in the hierarchy, these two. So they need to be nested. Right, then, yeah, let's switch to this side for the regular expression. So you have the hash, and the example is an OK button with capital letters, and one that's the pipe symbol is the OR with regular expressions, and then you have a small K character here. Yeah, then there's another class, and that's an example for a special syntax with tabs. You can specify it like a class, tab panel colon, and then the index of the tab, that's text index, or the abbreviation for this would be hashtag, and then just the name of the tab. And of course, there are a lot more combinations. Right, here are some examples. I suppose as I explained it, you've had a look at the examples. And then, of course, there's a ranking when between the criteria. So the name has highest priority, just like with the normal components as well, component nodes. And also that's quickest because of the hash map that QFTest creates when opening a page. So QFTest has a look through the hash map, and when it finds it there, fine, then it'll use the component specified by that name. If not, it will go through the components of the page and have a look at the label, whether the feature of that component or the QFS label match the text given, and then that's okay. Then it'll find the component, and then there's a third level, that's the label components. They're a bit special because they are used for this criteria of other components like text fields or tables, or a lot of other components. So when you want to address the label itself, you have to use an index either, or you can, what is better, put the class label and then the colon to say that's the label, and then the text of the label. So you'd have like hash label colon surname, for example, and then you'd be addressing the label of the text field. Yeah, and the ranking order can be changed via option. We'll come to that later. Right, again, pros and cons. No component tree at all. When you're using SmartIDs, but you can combine them with what the tests can use SmartIDs, and they can also use component nodes. So you can switch between the two from one event node to the next, or in the procedure calls, you can either use SmartIDs or the QFTest ID of the component nodes. Though you don't, if you decide to use SmartIDs, you don't have to update your current existing tests at all. You can leave it as it is, and then implement the new tests using SmartIDs if you like. And when you got nested SmartIDs, you can also have the container component has to be a node, and then you can have the child, the component within, as a SmartID, for example. And these disadvantages remain because, well, obviously, again, you don't have a single place where the criteria are bundled, like in the component node. So you have to do the maintenance change via search and replace. Then when you're using labels, again, QFTest has to search the greater number of components than when it has to follow a hierarchy. And also you have the reduced number of recognition criteria, but here it's not as bad as with the generic components, because you can combine the criteria much more easily than with generic components. Right, with QFTest, it comes as a preview. With QFTest 6.0, it comes as a preview feature, and in the record menu, you have an extra entry, record SmartIDs, and here's the option how to change the order in which QFTest looks for the components, also records them. So in that case, when you're working with procedure calls, you can either type the text of the label, or you can also go to record component and click the component, and then the SmartID will be in the buffer, and you can paste it to the parameter or wherever you want it. Right, where are the typical usages when you want to get rid of the component hierarchy to increase the readability of tests, especially with procedure calls? Then you can do test-driven development, because you don't have to record the components or create the generic components. It's much easier to just insert either the procedure calls or the mouse clicks and checks and whatever you want, and then just type either the text as the label of the component, or when you got the application design where you also have the names or IDs that will be given to the GUI components, then you can also use the names. With web applications, obviously, that'll be the IDs, and create the test without the application or the dialog or whatever you want to test, without it existing. So yeah, you can, and then the testers can develop the stuff and you test it right away whether it does what it's supposed to be doing. And then it can be used for keyword-based tests. We'll come to the part where I'll show you things directly in QFTest. And we also got an integration with a robot framework where the components will be addressed via SmartIDs, because otherwise with component nodes, that's a bit too difficult. Yeah, and then you can also write tests that will run on a Swing application just as well as on a web application without any changes, as long as the dialogues are and the labels or the names and IDs are the same in each application. Right. Yeah, then that's not SmartIDs, but a topic closely linked to SmartIDs, because here you can set a scope, like a container, where QFTest will look for a certain component. So this can be used with normal component nodes and SmartIDs. So the scope limits the range where QFTest looks for the component addressed to that container, and that will make component recognition a lot faster, especially with web applications where you have a lot of objects on one page. And that can also improve the readability of tests. You can set the scope in the comment of a node via add scope, that's the doc tag, and then the SmartID or the QFTest ID of the component. And with dialogues and pop-ups, the scope will be set implicitly. And you can also nest the scopes. Right, when you exit the node the scope was set for, it will you're leaving that scope. And also when you put a doctech add no scope or set a different scope, then the previous scope will be deleted as well. And of course, you're leaving it implicitly when you're closing the dialog or the pop-up. Yeah, with SmartIDs, you have to be a bit careful when you have like address fields, one for the customer, one for the delivery address, and maybe another one for the invoice. Then you may have 3 first name fields, and yeah, then here you could either nest the SmartIDs or put the scope for customer address, and then within that sequence or procedure that has that scope, you can use first name, and that applies only to the customer's first name. Or when you have like 2 types of objects, like a table and a combo box that both have the same label, you can put, or the text field, you can put the class in front, and then that specifies the correct component as well. Or using an index is, you should try to avoid it, because the index is that of the of the application, like developers set it up, and it's not necessarily the order that you see on the screen. So but sometimes it's quite useful, like when you have a table cell here, the table colon, so that's the class. Then you have the normal index that you know from, like that's the same like with component nodes addressing the cell. Then you have the add hash. That means that's a nested SmartID, and then the button in that table cell. And here we are addressing the second one because the index starts at 0. So that's the second one. Right. No. And again, keep simple things simple. That means when you're recording a SmartID and that would become too complicated, then QFTest will rather record a component node. You can always, because QFTest, we've got a certain algorithm to look or decide how to create the SmartID, and when you know a better SmartID than QFTest came up with, you can always change that manually as well. But usually QFTest comes up with a SmartID. Right, let's have a look at QFTest now. Yeah, I prepared a bit. So I started our web demo application, and then we've got some QFTest here. So yeah, let me just type a few SmartIDs. Event nodes, like a mouse event. And in the place of the QFTest component ID, I now type a hash, which means use the following text as a SmartID. And I could type final price. So you've got to type it exactly like the text on the label. Okay, and when I click here, yeah, now it's working. For some reason, okay, I've got to highlight it with a pop-up. Right, so you see QFTest finds the text and highlights it. Then another one, for example, oh, let me just create a few, so I don't have to go to the insert menu all the time. Right, so I could also type button colon. No, this one. Highlight. Yeah, that's more like it. Right, so that's the button. Then I could write table colon, because that's a class name, and then the normal text like add model, and then the numeric index like 1. Right. Okay, what else could I show? Some regular expression, percent, and then price. Because when you want the third instance of some component with price as a label, highlight here. So that's that. But as I said, that's the order. That index represents the order that the programmers have given to the components. So it would be better to make like this to specify that pattern more closely. And now it's highlighting the accessories price. Yeah, let's switch to nested components, and I'd like to do that in the next test case using a scope. Right, open that and then check recording of SmartIDs is on. Yeah. So start the recording and first open this and then and deactivate that. Right, so yeah. Okay, and then let me record setting the name. Right, so let's put that into a sequence. Set address, and let's prune that a bit. Right, so that's what I want. So let me highlight this highlight. So that's the first one. But we also got a surname here, and with the address, street address, we got 3 text fields here. Right, so now when I can set the scope at scope, customer, don't forget the hash, customer address, for example, and then copy that. So that's only text up here. The important bit is the scope down here in your voice address. And again, you have to type the text exactly like the label for that titled panel. Right, so now because of that scope, when I highlight this, no, let's replay it, that's better. Yeah, highlighting doesn't have a look at the parent, at the sequence node, so I have to replay it and then QFTest finds the correct fields. And now if I wanted to use it for the last one as well, like you would in a procedure or a loop vendor, then I'd like to use the same, I'd like to enhance this SmartID and put a regular expression here. So %, and then either surname new, or that's the pipe symbol vendor, and the same thing with the first name, and again the or, and homepage. Right, and now I can execute that. Maybe I should have changed the scope as well, like this. And now it's going to the correct not quite, well, or homepage. I don't know. I don't want to check this out now. Right. So via the scope, you can use that as a procedure, and then the regular expression makes more sense, and pass the values as parameters. But now I don't want to set up a procedure and all that, so I showed you that. Right, so I'll just record cancel, and then that test case will work as well. Right, and now I'd like to record. Yeah, I'd like to show you how to record something, and I'd like to open options. We're not recording yet, just open options, then create a new vehicle, and then check that it exists. Right, so and then record a check. Right, so we got opening the, we don't need that click. That should work without the tab. Then new button, mouse click the table and check the text. Right, let's run that. Okay, right. Expected. don't know why. What happened before? Oh, I had never. Oh, I don't know. Right. Let's run that again. That's better. Right. Now I'd like to execute that test case on the Swing application of the car config demo application as well. So I prepared that I can just swap this and then run that dependency. And actually should work when I run the test case. So now QFTest will start the Swing application of that demo. And now, because in that application, the names of the GUI objects are the same, like the options menu as the ID in the web application, M options, and here it's the name, M options, and then this item is MI vehicles, and then the name of the text fields are the same, and the names of the buttons are the same, and also of these fields here. So because the developers made sure that the names and IDs are identical, I can record the test case on one technology and replay it on both. Okay, right. Now I'd like to show you a few keywords. So keywords are implemented as procedure calls typically. So right, yeah, I prepared the standard library of QFTest, and I'd like to, well, the last, I want to put the check text last, but since that check is, no, that procedure is selected already, I can just copy and paste it and then look for the other things I want to do. So here I want to click a table cell, select table. Oh, that's web. No, I want to have Swing here. Table, select table cell. So first that, then general table here. Do click. Right. So now I need to fill in the parameters. And there's only the one table. I can say table. Then the column is model. The row, let's have I5. Then do a click to hash -5, and that we got the percent symbol, and that means a regular expression with QFTest. So I have to tell QFTest to treat that as a normal text and escape it with the backslash. Same happens when you have colons in normal text. You would have to put a backslash before that as well. Right, and then, yeah, let's execute the two, and we'll see what text to put with the final price. Price dollar. Right. What? I wanted to hit enter to execute it. Right. So yeah, that's yeah, it's more or less readable. But we got a new feature that I would like to show you as yeah, a preview, or yeah, what we are currently working on. So I'd like to copy this, and well, I can add any parameters here like dummies. They will not have any effect on the procedure, but they'll be showing on this side. So I can do something like select cell. No, that's the value. Sorry, the name is dummy, and then select cell. Okay, and put that first. So now you have this extra parameter showing, select cell, and then the other parameters. And if I move the table a bit further, model like this, and then the new feature is that you can add a doc tag here, like keywords, and then I can type a number telling QF-test how many of the parameters to show here, and also not to show procedure call, and not to put this name and the package structure, but just the parameters there without commas. So when I type 3 and then enter, I need to activate that keywords optics on, and let's type a 3 after that, and then it's working. Right. Keywords, not the 3, and S was missing. Right, so now on this side, nothing has changed, only that I added the extra parameter that I want to have for the keyword. I have a nice text here, and then the stock tag telling QF-test how many of these parameters to use. So I prepared another, right, let's use, yeah, I can use this, and now I prepared, wait, I need to put that here, keywords T, so that it's included. And now I can open that window as well, and then it's easier just to do a drag and drop. Table, select cell. Here we want this test case. Get rid of that, and just do a drag and drop of the A. They are not in the same cell. Where's the keywords? Okay, then I set to click, Control C, Control V, and then the check. Right, so here we now need to enter the real parameters like model and the row I5 and the QF-test ID of the table has been set to hash table, so you can change that or leave it. And then we want to click the button. /% and then check that both right, and now yeah, okay, let's run that. And actually it's a copy of the QF-test standard library, so I could remove the file name here, and then it would work just as the same as now, and because the dummy parameters have no effect on the procedure at all. Right, and the latest feature we got is that you can actually record keywords like that. Coded. Right, open that, and I need to activate that functionality, and I'll to skip that and run this. Okay, running. Okay, so now when I go into recording mode, click SL and click the button and go into check mode. Click the final price. Oops, I haven't changed the language, but yeah, you can set this to English as well. Yeah, I forgot to change the language, sorry. Right, yeah, never mind. If I execute that with English, you'll get English keywords there. Right.